The Argonauts. Jason, king of Iolcus, was forced to fly from his dominions, which had been usurped by his younger brother Pelias, and with difficulty succeeded in saving the life of his young son Jason, who was at that time only 10 years of age. He entrusted him to the care of the centaur Chiron, by whom he was carefully trained in company with other noble youths, who, like himself, afterwards signalized themselves by their bravery and heroic exploits. For 10 years Jason remained in the cave of the centaur, by whom he was instructed in all useful and warlike arts. But as he approached manhood, he became filled with an unconquerable desire to regain his paternal inheritance. He therefore took leave of his kind friend and preceptor, and set out for Iolcus to demand from his uncle Pelias the kingdom which he had so unjustly usurped. In the course of his journey he came to a broad and foaming river, on the banks of which he perceived an old woman, who implored him to help her across. At first he hesitated, knowing that even alone he would find some difficulty in stemming the fierce torrent, but, pitying her forlorn condition, he raised her in his arms and succeeded, with a great effort, in reaching the opposite shore. But as soon as her feet had touched the earth she became transformed into a beautiful woman, who, looking kindly at the bewildered youth, informed him that she was the goddess Hera, and that she would henceforth guide and protect him throughout his career. She then disappeared, and, full of hope and courage at his divine manifestation, Jason pursued his journey. He now perceived that, in crossing the river, he had lost one of his sandals, but as it could not be recovered, he was obliged to proceed without it. On his arrival at Iolcus, he found his uncle in the marketplace, offering up a public sacrifice to Poseidon. When the king had concluded his offering, his eye fell upon the distinguished stranger, whose manly beauty and heroic bearing had already attracted the attention of his people. Observing that one foot was unshod, he was reminded of an oracular prediction which foretold to him the loss of his kingdom by a man wearing only one sandal. He, however, disguised his fears, conversed kindly with the youth, and drew from him his name and errand. Then, pretending to be highly pleased with his nephew, Pelias entertained him sumptuously for 5 days, during which time all was festivity and rejoicing. On the 6th, Jason appeared before his uncle, and with manly firmness demanded from him the throne and kingdom which were his by right. Pelias, dissembling his true feelings, smilingly consented to grant his request, provided that in return Jason would undertake an expedition for him which his advanced age prevented him from accomplishing himself. He informed his nephew that the shade of Phrixus had appeared to him in his dreams, and entreated him to bring back from Colchis his mortal remains and the Golden Fleece, and added that if Jason succeeded in obtaining for him these sacred relics, throne, kingdom, and scepter would be his. Story of the Golden Fleece. Athamas, king of Dosha, had married Nephele, a cloud nymph, and their children were Helle and Phrixus. The restless and wandering nature of Nephele, however, soon wearied her husband, who, being a mortal, had little sympathy with his ethereal consort. So he divorced her and married the beautiful but wicked Ino, sister of Semele, who hated her stepchildren and even planned their destruction. But the watchful Nephele contrived to circumvent her cruel designs, and succeeded in getting the children out of the palace. She then placed them both on the back of a winged ram with a fleece of pure gold, which had been given to her by Hermes, and on this wonderful animal brother and sister rode through the air over land and sea. But on the way Helle, becoming seized with giddiness, fell into the sea, called after her the Hellespont, and was drowned. Phrixus arrived safely at Colchis, where he was hospitably received by King Aetes, who gave him one of his daughters in marriage. In gratitude to Zeus for the protection accorded him during his flight, Phryxus sacrificed to him the golden ram, whilst the fleece he presented to Aeetes, who nailed it up in the grove of Ares, and dedicated it to the god of war. An oracle having declared that the life of Aeetes depended on the safe keeping of the fleece, he carefully guarded the entrance to the grove by placing before it an immense dragon which never slept. Building and launch of the Argo. We will now return to Jason, who eagerly undertook the perilous expedition proposed to him by his uncle, who, well aware of the dangers attending such an enterprise, hoped by this means to rid himself forever of the unwelcome intruder. Jason accordingly began to arrange his plans without delay, and invited the young heroes whose friendship he had formed whilst under the care of Chiron to join him in the perilous expedition. None refused the invitation, all feeling honored at being allowed the privilege of taking part in so noble and heroic an undertaking. Jason now applied to Argos, one of the cleverest shipbuilders of this time, who, under the guidance of Pallas Athene, built for him a splendid 50-oared galley, which was called the Argo after the builder. In the upper deck of the vessel the goddess had embedded a board from the speaking oak of the oracle of Zeus at Dodona, which ever retained its powers of prophecy. The exterior of the ship was ornamented with magnificent carvings, and the whole vessel was so strongly built that it defied the power of the winds and waves, and was, nevertheless, so light that the heroes, when necessary, were able to carry it on their shoulders. When the vessel was completed, the Argonauts, so called after their ship, assembled, and their places were distributed by lot. Jason was appointed commander-in-chief of the expedition. Typhus acted as steersman, Lynceus as pilot. In the bow of the vessel sat the renowned hero Hercules. In the stern, Pelias, father of Achilles, and Telamon, the father of Ajax the Great. In the inner space were Castor and Pollux, Neleus, the father of Nestor, Admetus, the husband of Alcestis, Meleager, the slayer of the Caledonian boar, Orpheus, the renowned singer, Menoctius, the father of Patroclus, Theseus, afterwards king of Athens, and his friend Pirithous, the son of Ixion, Hylas, the adopted son of Heracles, Euphemus, the son of Poseidon, Oileus, father of Ajax the Lesser, Zetes and Calais, the winged sons of Boreas, Idaman the seer, the son of Apollo, Mopsus, the Thessalian prophet, etc., etc. Before their departure, Jason offered a solemn sacrifice to Poseidon and all the other sea deities. He also invoked the protection of Zeus and the Fates, and then, Mopsus having taken the auguries and found them auspicious, the heroes stepped on board. And now, a favorable breeze having sprung up, they take their allotted places, the anchor is weighed, and the ship glides like a bird out of the harbor into the waters of the great sea. Arrival at Lemnos. The Argo, with her brave crew of 50 heroes, was soon out of sight, and the sea breeze only wafted to the shore a faint echo of the sweet strains of Orpheus. For a time all went smoothly, but the vessel was soon driven by stress of weather to take refuge in a harbor in the island of Lemnos. This island was inhabited by women only, who the year before, in a fit of mad jealousy, had killed all the male population of the island, with the exception of the father of the queen, Hypsipyle. As the protection of their island now devolved upon themselves, they were always on the lookout for danger. When, therefore, they sighted the Argo from afar, they armed themselves and rushed to the shore, determined to repel any invasion of their territory. On arriving in port, the Argonauts, astonished at beholding an armed crowd of women, dispatched a herald in one of their boats, bearing the staff of peace and friendship. Hypsipyle, the queen, proposed that food and presents should be sent to the strangers, in order to prevent their landing, but her old nurse, who stood beside her, suggested that this would be a good opportunity to provide themselves with noble husbands, who would act as their defenders, and thus put an end to their constant